Hello, so this video will cover every single spell that is available on the release of the spell system as a whole. The reason why I didn't do specific spell spotlights on the rest of the spells is because of time and resource constraints. This video has already taken many hours alone. With the new spells coming out at the end of this month, I figured that this is a good video to do. I'll go over every single currently released spell on what they do, some methods of counterplay against them, and my overall opinion on them. I'll also give them 2 grades based on how useful and versatile the spell is and how free to play friendly the spell is. If a spell is good but requires max rank to be useful, then the spell will be like A tier in usability but D tier in cost. I hope that makes sense. I'll segment this video using the YouTube feature to make it easier to jump around. I don't expect people to sit for a whole 20-minute video in one sitting, so hopefully that should help. Anyways, enjoy. The first spell I want to cover is the Chasing Falcon spell. At rank 1, this spell will activate before the 5th turn. It will target the first enemy magician and will last for 12 turns. Ranking up the skill allows you to target units of different classes while also activating sooner. This spell is optimal at rank 3, where you're able to target the enemy support, which is arguably the most valuable thing you want to target. Rank 5 is also pretty useful because you can also target the enemy warrior. Rank 6 and rank 7 are not necessary at all, just keep your Falcon at rank 5 at most. Falcon applies an unremovable concentrated fire that has priority over taunts. This concentrated fire also ignores any immunities. Falcon is useful in all contexts of the game. Supports are often the backbone of any formation, and you can make it so that you can at least take out one support guaranteed. In Guild War, Falcon is insanely useful to take out key units if you know the turn order. If you're doing a scout and you notice that the form is only running one class of a specific unit, such as one warrior or one mage, then you know your Falcon will only target that unit if you were to use it, so you can build your strategy around that concept alone. Lastly, in Guild War defense, Falcon is useful to ensure that the enemy cannot run the specific type of unit without fear of that unit being targeted by your units. Most people often choose to target supports in their Guild War defense because it's not only a free kill for your defense, but it makes it harder for their units to kill yours. The only way to play around Falcon is to sacrifice a unit of a corresponding class or simply don't run the class of that unit altogether, and that's kind of a shitty situation for your opponent. Overall, I give Falcon an S in terms of viability and usefulness. Because it's already very strong at rank 3, I give Falcon an S in terms of how free to play friendly it is. It's a very good spell overall. So the next spell I want to cover is Blue Light Wisp. This will target the first selectable ally of a class and give them a special buff that allows them to pass their next turn over once they've taken their turn. If you're targeting a magician, then they will have to survive with the buff to be able to pass their turn. If they die preemptively before getting to move, then the spell is wasted. At rank 1, Blue Light Wisp activates before the 6th turn and targets your first moving defender. So your defender has to move within those 4 turns or else the spell is wasted. The spell can either be ranked up to increase the duration of the Wisp or have it target other class of units, while also eventually lowering the startup of the spell. The ideal rank for this spell depends a lot on the strategy that you're running, but the most preferred one is rank 5 because the warrior initiation is the most common one. The issue, however, is that the spell still takes a long time to get started, which is resolved at rank 7, but that's pretty pricey. The general concept of being able to move different units without handing your turn to your opponent yet is appealing, but the strategy has to be really solid for it to have value. It's very possible to end up just wasting all of your attacks. The spell can allow for some pretty powerful openings in arena attacks and is pretty solid in arena in general. It could also be used in some pretty elaborate Guild War attacks as well. It's overall a spell with a lot of potential. The main issue is that it has a very high bar of entry to be consistent and is a terrible free to play friendly spell. I give Wisp overall a B in terms of usefulness. It's decent, but other spells generally provide a lot more value for a lot less thinking. Wisp, when used well, is definitely an A tier spell though. In terms of value that you're getting from Wisp, I'm giving it a D. It needs a lot of investment to not feel tacky to use. So the spell I want to cover now is Consecutive Sylphid. So Consecutive Sylphid provides a buff that allows your unit to attack twice. At rank 1, it activates on turn 8 and allows your first moving warrior to attack twice so long as they attack within the 3 turns that the spell activates. If they don't, the spell is wasted. If the unit dies with the buff or dies during the first attack, then the spell is wasted as well. The spell could be ranked up so that the buff lasts longer and that you can target different class of units. At rank 5, you could target your magician to move twice, which enables them to attack in round 1. Rank 6 and 7 reduces the startup timer of the spell and is not mandatory, but it's nice to have. Sylphid is a very interesting spell, especially at rank 5 where you can target your own mage. Having a mage move on round 1 opens a lot of interesting gimmicks, but the question one should always ask is if this is valuable. Mages, like any units, are prone to attacks that are not effective, either by hitting the wrong targets or getting only a few units within their AoE. This is also the case for warriors as well. This makes Sylphid strategies highly inconsistent and kind of all or nothing. If you get a powerful opening where an Alec moves twice and kills like 5 units, then you probably win the game. If you get an opening where Alec suicides onto something and then you lose Alec and the spell is gone as well. Sylphid is also highly susceptible to charming Sirens and Gungnir, as both spells often target warriors and can activate before or on the turn that Sylphid activates. Sylphid can backfire or fail a lot in a lot of situations. The final concern with Sylphid is its low duration time. Unless you can meticulously plan out the turn, Sylphid can have situations where the unit does not move within the buff period of the activation. In the situation regarding mages, the mage may move too early before the Sylphid activates on them, and the spell is also wasted. Sylphid is primarily a Guild War enabler and works very well with powerful and impactful units like Malze, Alec, Lumen, Nartis, and Levia. With powerful units, Sylphid's potential could be truly realized in those situations where you can guarantee that the spell will not go to waste. Overall, I'll give Sylphid a B in terms of usefulness. In terms of how budget friendly the spell is, I'll give it a C. Sylphid only really begins to become interesting at rank 5 and above. Its early ranks duration is way too short to be reliable, and its rank 3 that allows defenders to move twice is just simply not useful at all. Coiling Viper is a spell that reduces a unit's action range to 1 tile. Warrior, defenders, and mages can only attack their main tile, and supports can only buff 1 tile. Like all spell debuffs, this bypasses debuff immunity and cannot be cleansed. At rank 1, Viper activates before the 3rd turn and targets all the units in the top lane, and lasts for 8 turns. Viper could be ranked up to target other lanes and increase its duration. Most notably, when Viper is at rank 7, it activates before the 1st turn. Viper is a powerful spell that can hurt many warriors and defenders that rely on large AoE ranges, while also reducing the effectiveness of supports that rely on buffing multiple units. For example, you can use Viper to reduce Galenia's support range to 1 tile so that she only provides 1 unit with the immortality buff. This is actually one of the most valuable uses of Viper. Subsequently, you can also use Viper to reduce a character like Alec's range to just 1 tile so that he takes out less units. The spell is great to protect your own units in Arena while also having a lot of utility in Guild War. Viper is perhaps one of my most used spells as of late. I use it a lot to protect my units against warrior heavy compositions, and in Guild War it's one of my most useful spells because the Guild War defense meta heavily favors Galenia buffing a cluster of defenders or mages. Viper's main weakness is that it's a lane targeting spell. It can sometimes miss when it hits the wrong units in Arena. Also, some units don't really rely on their AoE to be useful, or some are already single target to begin with. Lastly, mages are generally unaffected as Viper is only active for round 1 usually. Overall, Viper is really good and is definitely an S tier spell in my opinion. As for how budget friendly it is, I'm giving it a B. Viper is useful from the get-go as an arena spell and remains so for the rest of its rank up. If you're serious about Guild War, Viper will ideally want to be max rank as its final rank allows its effect to activate at battle start and immediately affect the first enemy support that moves. In the base spell set of this game, Viper is definitely one of the best Guild War spells. Howling Direwolf reduces the offensive effectiveness of units by reducing their attack by 150% and crit damage by 600. Direwolf will always activate before the 1st turn. At rank 1, Direwolf will last for 8 turns and target top lane. Direwolf could be ranked up to target other lanes and increase its duration. Direwolf is similar to Viper in that both spells are capable of reducing a unit's effectiveness, but Direwolf is far more specific in that it affects a unit's offensive performance instead of their AoE range. This generally is less effective in most situations of this meta because Direwolf only ends up being really useful against warriors. Unlike Viper, Direwolf will still allow the opponent's supports to operate at near full capacity. Very few defenders also really care about the crit damage stat, and the ones that do utilize crit damage like Kaelin don't really care if it's reduced for a while since their selling point is their utility. Lastly, mages are only generally unaffected because Direwolf will only last throughout round 1. As a result, even if the attack and crit detriments look appealing, it's actually pretty niche and specific. There's not a lot of situations where it outshines Viper in Arena, and it's even worse in Guild War because the solution to a lot of Guild War attacks is to use the right units to tank the enemy ones as opposed to using the questionable tanks and relying on Direwolf to keep them alive. Plays like that tend to be very risky. Overall, I'm giving Direwolf a C in usefulness. It has its moments where it can shine, and the fact that it can always activate on the 1st turn is pretty nice. If a warrior meta becomes mainstream, this spell could definitely be considered. As for how budget friendly this spell is, I'm giving it a B as it's pretty useful from the get-go. I still would not recommend this one overall though, at least not yet. Deadly Gungnir deals direct damage of 1000% of a unit's max life. In short, Deadly Gungnir will kill anything and everything. At rank 1, Gungnir activates before the 10th turn and will target the first moving warrior. Ranking up Gungnir will allow you to target different class of units between Magician and Defender and decrease the spell startup time. Gungnir is probably the simplest spell to understand. It's not even a spell really, it's actually just a gun. Aim it at who you want dead and pop. It's not complex at all. Gungnir is remarkably strong for that reason alone. It's a spell that can delete a unit for free, but there are many workarounds. Units with Galania buff can survive. Units with their own immortality mechanic can survive as well, such as Ledicrad, Mamo, and Lloyd. Units with resurrections will simply come back to life, such as Lucius or Frisia. The future may also contain more units like this. Interestingly enough, this spell can one-shot Grand Hilders at +3 or above because her debuff reflect causes her to take 2 instances of Gungnir damage, one from the Gungnir itself and one from the damage that she reflects, which ends up being redirected back to herself. This isn't a bug. The devs of Brave Knight specifically said that this is intentional. There are only 2 ways that Grant can survive. One is if she's at 100% defense, since the redirected damage from her debuff reflect is not direct damage. And the second is that if she's at +2 or below, because the debuff reflect does not actually reflect damage. In the case of Ledicrad, who duplicates of Grant's debuff reflect, he will also take the redirected damage from Gungnir, but he can block it if he duplicates Glacia's, Arcan's, or Kaelin's guard. Going back to the general aspects of Gungnir, a spell that deletes any unit of a class is remarkably strong, obviously, to where this spell sees very common and frequent use in Arena. To play around it, you need to ensure that your first moving warrior is one that you can afford to lose. If they're targeting Mage, have Helga move first instead so they can fire off Gungnir on her. She dies and your team gets buffs. If it's a Defender, have your Lucius or Mamo move before your Grand. Turn order matters here. In Guild War, this spell is also insanely useful to just eliminate one less headache in an enemy form. Gungnir has very good synergy with many spells. Overall, Gungnir gets an S in terms of usefulness. This spell is almost never a bad idea to run. It's also insanely easy to use and I recommend it to all players. In terms of budgeting, I give it an A. Gungnir is good from the get-go, but eliminating defenders is very strong and desirable many times given how strong they are in Brave 9. Ranking up this spell to 5 is a bit costly, but it's well worth it. Don't bother with rank 6 or 7 if you're on a budget. Chaotic Nightmare reduces a unit's defense by 50% and increases their incoming damage taken by 200%. At rank 1, Nightmare activates before the 5th turn, targets units in the top lane, and lasts for 6 turns. Nightmare could be ranked up to target the 2 other lanes while increasing its debuff duration and allowing it to activate sooner. Nightmare could be ranked up to target the 2 other lanes while increasing its debuff duration and allowing it to activate sooner. Nightmare is a spell designed to soften up enemies by reducing their defense and greatly amplifying the damage that they would take. Some units have bad matchups against 100% defense units such as Yuri, Christina, Eleanor, Angelica, and the king of all warriors, Larkus. Nightmare is an interesting spell in that regard in that it allows these units to overcome their bad matchups. Christina in particular has good synergy with Nightmare because Nightmare is a lane targeting spell and Christina is a very good lane killing warrior. The trend is that Nightmare can give some newfound polish on characters that can't hurt 100% defense units either because they're an old design or because it's an intentional gameplay weakness in their skill set. The other aspect is the 200% incoming damage increase that will be useful for any unit. This damage amplification is really useful to ensure that your units kill specific enemies such as tanks. Nightmare does carry a lot of weaknesses, however. Nightmare does nothing against units that depends on guards as their tanky trait. Arcan, Kaelin, Yuri, Lucius, and Seto function the same if they're inflicted with Nightmare. Nightmare is also a lane targeting spell, and you can end up targeting the wrong lane in Arena and getting very little value out of it. Nightmare also does not last long, as its early ranks carry a long spell startup that makes it hard to take advantage of. Its short duration also makes it so that mages will not be able to take advantage of the spell's debuffs unless Sylphid is involved. Overall, Nightmare gets a B in terms of usefulness. There's a lot of instances where this spell could be appreciated, especially in Guild War, and it could open some new strategies with units in Arena. The main issue is its value, which I'm giving it a grade of C. Nightmare's low activation duration and long startup require some investment to have it be more consistent, and the value that you're getting from investing in Nightmare to rank 6 or 7 isn't generally worth it. When compared to Orochi, which has some overlapping roles with Nightmare, Orochi is the better spell value in my opinion, and I'll go over that one later. Revenging Rakshasa provides one of your units with a fixed damage counter that will deal 125% of the attacker's max HP. Dealing 125% of a unit's max HP will kill any unit unless that unit has a special damage mitigation, resurrection, or immortality mechanics. Ranking up Rakshasa also allows you to apply the buff onto magicians and defenders while also increasing the Rakshasa spell duration and decreasing its startup. Rakshasa is an interesting spell in that it could turn otherwise harmless units like your supports into counter-attacking death machines. There's some appeal in that alone, but Rakshasa has many fundamental weaknesses. In regular arena and world arena, there are a lot of counterplay to fix damage, even if it should be lethal. Vinaka can absorb damage for her warriors with her aura. Galenia could provide her allies with immortality mechanics. Some units resurrect, and some units have guard. Rakshasa ends up killing very few things as a result in those formats. Rakshasa is far more useful in Novice Arena, however, since units in those formats don't have an answer to fix damage counters like Rakshasa. At least there isn't a 4-star unit yet that can play around it. I feel like I say this a lot, but Rakshasa best shines in Guild War, especially if your enemy is running Falcon. Many formations in Guild War may use Falcon to target your support, and they open with units that don't have great ways to survive Rakshasa, then Rakshasa may be a compelling option because it's a great way to save on turn count. Turn count is a huge factor in Guild War currently because of Letocrat, so being able to quickly eliminate units with a Rakshasa is actually very valuable. But then there's another issue, its incredibly short duration. Even at max rank, Rakshasa only lasts for 6 turns, which is pathetic. Overall, Rakshasa gets a D for usefulness. If it lasted 3 more turns, I'd be willing to give it C rank. But as it is right now, Rakshasa sucks in everything that isn't Novice Arena. In terms of spell value, I say that it's C tier just because its most valuable spell rank for Guild War is at rank 4, which is better than a majority of other spells which either sees its most value at rank 5 or further. But overall, Rakshasa sucks. Don't buy it. It's a meme spell for sure. Protective Aegis provides your allies with the ability to absorb AoE attacks and reduce the attacker to 1 tile. This is pretty much Cecilia's main skill imbued into a spell. At rank 1, Aegis activates before the 14th turn and will affect all of your units in the top lane and will last for 8 turns. It can be ranked up to target the other lanes while having its duration increased and its spell startup reduced. Aegis is a defensive version of Coiling Vipers. Viper inflicts a debuff that forces the enemy's range to 1 tile, while Aegis allows your units to reduce the enemy's range to 1 tile if they are attacked. Viper requires you to know where your enemy is, while Aegis eliminates that guessing game by having you target your own lane. The main issue with Aegis is that it has a massive startup of 14 turns. Even at max rank, it still takes 12 turns to activate. If the meta favors warrior units where there's a lot of deaths happening early in the game, the spell will often activate when it's no longer useful. In a slower paced meta where tanks and mages are more frequently used, this spell is a lot more usable. Because of its long startup, it can actually help block various attacks that occur on round 2, primarily mage attacks. Aegis has some problems though. Units with strong vertical AoE coverage can hit another unit on a different lane and still feel the full power of their AoE attack. Some examples being Susera, Levia, Nerua, and Catherine. Aegis also does nothing to actually reduce the effectiveness of the attacker. Reducing AoE is nice, but it still kinda sucks to lose the unit anyways. Then there are units who just do single target damage like Slain. Aegis is purely a defensive spell, so it's not very useful with Guild War. It's only somewhat useful in Arena to enable very specific strategies. Overall, I'm giving Aegis a D in terms of overall usefulness. If you want a spell that reduces AoE, go with Viper instead, as it could also sabotage supports. In terms of the value that you're getting from Aegis, I'll give it a C as it's equally useful or useless in any of its spell rank. While rank 5 may be useful to enable you to choose any lane to put Aegis on, rank 7 reduces the startup of Aegis to 12 from rank 5's 14, which honestly wouldn't feel terribly different. The spell is definitely competing with Rakshasa in terms of how niche it can be. Bloodthirsty Orochi applies a DOT onto enemies that deal 50% direct damage of their current life every turn. Because it's based on current life, this means that a unit with no healing will go from 100% life to 50% on the first turn, and then 50% to 25% on the second, and so on. They can reach close to death, but Orochi will never actually kill them. Also, like other spell debuffs, this cannot be cleansed and will ignore immunities. Orochi at rank 1 moves before the first turn and targets the top lane, and it lasts for 12 turns. Ranking it up will allow you to target other lanes while increasing Orochi's duration. Orochi is a straightforward but powerful spell that ensures all units in a lane will be working with far less HP. This is insanely crippling for units that rely on HP for their gimmicks. Seto and Arcant utilize HP in conjunction with their guard, but Orochi makes it so that they just instantly die. Jin and Vinaka also need some HP to utilize their skill set, but Orochi can ruin that. Because it deals current life damage, Orochi cannot be out-healed. Healing will only just prevent the unit from reaching a bare minimum of 1% life, which often isn't useful. As a result, it's a great way to soften up tanks and put them at a lower life threshold to make them far easier to kill. Orochi can be outmaneuvered by certain units, however. Some units don't utilize HP as their main way to stay alive, such as Lucius. Mamo can also still tank many attacks fine if she has Orochi, and can still withstand a few direct damage hits because of her immortality and death guard. Some units simply don't care if they're at low life because the line between life and death was always thin anyway, such as Alec and Gunther. Some units also protect themselves with guards, so HP was never much of a factor anyway, such as Balze or Yuri. Orochi is pretty useful in Arena, Novice Arena, and Guild War. It's a very versatile spell. Overall, I give Orochi an A in usefulness. I found myself using the spell a lot with great success in many formats. In terms of bang for the buck, I'd also give Orochi an A. At rank 1, you have a spell that activates at round 1 and lasts for 12 turns, and that's insane value in my opinion. You could work towards the other ranks to unlock the other lanes, but you don't ever need to go beyond rank 5. Last but not least, we have the Charming Sirens. This spell charms an enemy. The charm bypasses debuff immunity and cannot be cleansed. At rank 1, this spell activates before the 5th turn and targets the first moving warrior. The charm lasts for 4 turns. Breaking up the spell allows you to target the enemy support and magician while also increasing its charm duration. Sirens is good to not only protect your units but also help the enemy kill themselves if they set themselves up for it. Charm was always a very strong attack interference debuff whenever it can be applied. If you don't know why, just look at how long Iris tormented Novice Arena. Sirens in Arena is fairly strong since warrior initiations are fairly common, but it also depends heavily on the meta. In a situation where mage and defender compositions are more widespread, Sirens is generally less useful. Siren can charm the enemy support at rank 3 and deny them from things like Elenia's buff, which is pretty clever sometimes. Targeting mages, however, is not useful unless they run something like Sylphid. Sirens is solid overall. It has its moments, but oftentimes it isn't the most powerful spell for the situation. It does really show its value though once you have that one unit kill most of your opponent's own form. Overall, Siren gets a B from me in terms of usefulness. I think the spell is always nice to run, especially in Arena, but generally is only useful against warriors with some minor exception for supports. In terms of the value that you get for Sirens though, it's definitely S tier. Sirens is notorious for being insanely good at rank 1 as it already targets the most important class to charm, which are warriors. And there we have it, that's all of the spells that we have access to on release. My tier list ends up looking like this. Like most tier lists, this is my opinion. If you feel that a spell should move up or down, then know that I probably will agree with that. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to always leave them in the comment section. And thank you.